Can you please call the hearing number for the record, please?
This is Commission hearing number 259 of Monday, 28 February 2022, in case 201 Thérèse Morel-Dubois, case 066 Basil Soundy, and case 200 John Clark.
Thank you. Can you please call the witness?
Basil Soundy.
Thank you. I, Basil Soundy, swear to tell you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soundy. I just noted on our schedule we identified your case as 68, but it's 66. That's your case number. So thank you for coming today. You are the complainant in this case, and the Commission would like you to set your complaint out. Please take your time. If you need to adjourn at any time, let us know, and we're happy to accommodate you, but thank you for coming.
Thank you.
The changes on the warrant are minimal today, right? There's no big rewrite or anything. Well, I had problems with that too. I've got need transcript when but it's not that my facts don't make sense. If they don't make sense, I identify it. You got a lot of documents, very well prepared, saved the investigator a lot of time.
Madam Chair, there's 42 years of hard work here. Right. Madam Chair and Commissioners, may I first of all thank you on behalf of the late Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson and on behalf of their heirs and successors for allowing me to make this representation concerning the North Home Hotel, which was acquired by the government of Seychelles under duress in May 1981, now for almost 42 years ago. May I also call for natural justice in this case, as it's been going on for the past 42 years, and obviously the heirs of Mr. Atkinson would like to see a finalization of the matter. But before I start, may I just ask us to remember the people of Ukraine today and their sad situation, and to wish the United Nations General Assembly, who are meeting today on the subject, a successful meeting concerning the whole matter of the Ukraine, people in suffering there, unnecessarily. Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Maybe I'd like to just start by a little history. The North Home property was originally owned by Lieutenant Colonel Henry Fulton, DSO, who came to Seychelles just after the First World War and settled here. He was a doctor by profession, and also a qualified lawyer. He was a doctor and a lawyer. And he developed the North Home there as a home. And indeed, this is where it got its name from. He named it the home in the North Home. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Fulton also assisted in the Second World War in North Africa with a detachment of Seychellois soldiers, and sadly, on the 18th of June 1944, he died in active service in North Africa. There is actually a memorial stone out on the North Home property. It's not a grave, but a memorial to the late Colonel Fulton, which I hope the current owners are looking after. Henry Fulton and the probate thereafter saw the property move to the Michaud family. How that was transferred, I don't know. I don't have the records of that, but the Michaud family then became the owners of the area which the North Home occupies.
The Michel or Michaud family? Sorry, Mr. Sandy. You said the property transferred to the Michel or Michaud? Michaud family.
Michaud
okay.
family, yes. Perhaps also as a little history, during my time and during the Michaud family time, over the course of the years, the North Home Hotel and guest and residents has seen people like Ian Fleming, the famous author, stay there and write some of his books. Somerset Maugham was another well-known author. The Duke of Bedford has stayed at the North Home. Noel Coward, many years ago, also stayed at the North Home. And more recently, Omar Sharif, the actor, the late actor. Another actor or actress, Bo Derek, stayed there. Yul Brynner, I remember, stayed there whilst I was managing director of the North Home. And I remember one evening when we were sitting sharing a beer, I was calling him Mr. Brynner, and he said, "Don't call me Yul Brynner, just call me Baldy," because he was completely bald. Sylvia Crystal was another actress who stayed there, and Compton Mackenzie, Alec Woe, Peter Sellers, the famous comedian Peter Sellers, stayed at the North Home, and in fact, I was sitting with him and Mr. Atkinson and Mrs. Atkinson having dinner on the veranda one evening, and Peter Sellers was saying, please, please, please sell me the North Home. I'd love to have this as my home, you know, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Mr. Atkinson was quite happy being the owner of the North Home at that time. George Tardios was another well-known, well, perhaps not so well-known person. He was a journalist, and he wrote about the North Home and published his writings in various articles about the North Home in international magazines. And of course, it's not the whole story, but it's a little bit, if you like, of the backstory about the North Home. As I say, I am or have been representing Mr. Atkinson and Mrs. Atkinson over the past 42 years in trying to convince the authorities in Seychelles that the change of ownership under very much duress, which I will explain to you very shortly, took place. And I had Mr. Atkinson's power of attorney whilst in Seychelles, and the power of attorney not only for the North Home, but his power of attorney for the property at Bevelong, which was eventually returned after 23, 24 years. However, now he's passed on, I do have a specific power of attorney, which I can give the Commission, specific power of attorney from the heirs and successors of the late Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson, which has been duly stamped and so on by. So this is, I'm acting on behalf of the Atkinson family now in this matter. As you know, over the past 57 years now that I've lived in Seychelles, Mr. Atkinson and myself, we've been very much in the investing in the country over the years, a lot of rupees. Prior to Mr. Atkinson, Mr. Raymond Hitchcock and his wife were my partners, but really it was after Mr. Hitchcock sold his shares to Mr. Atkinson that I became very close to the Atkinson family. And over the years, we invested in the North Home Hotel complex. We started a company called Consulman Limited, which was a consultancy management company here in Seychelles, and we undertook management work on behalf of different businesses, as well as on behalf of banks such as Barclays Bank at one time, where a business was struggling and we were asked to assist in putting the business that they asked us to assist back on the rails. Bodco Limited, Pest Control Services Limited, which was a rent-a-kill franchise company here in pest control. Anse-le-Mouche Water Sports Limited, which was a tourism business, specifically with charter of fishing boats and so on for deep sea fishing for tourism. Petit Car Hire belonged to us, and that was a car hire company that we were running. We actually had it for a number of years. Bunsen Travel, which is now called 7 Degrees South, was a tour company, a management destination company, basically. Air Bookings Limited, during the crisis of the coup d'etat and later the military attempted coup. During that time, there were many, well, nearly all the airlines flying into Seychelles stopped their service, and air bookings were the GSA for Kenya Airways, and I used to travel, well, I did travel to Nairobi and back on many occasions to persuade Kenya Airways to continue their service, and indeed ask them to increase their flights per week when Seychelles was completely cut off by all the other airlines. Kenya Airways were very happy to accommodate, especially after the coup and after the mercenary attack and so on. Kenya Airways were flying, I think, with the normal flights were 3 times a week, and it increased to 5 flights a week with connections to London and Europe. So air bookings was another part of our group of companies and investment. Island Trading Company, which was owned originally by the late Mr. Norman Esselmont. We purchased the company from Norman Esselmont when he retired, and it was a trading company, and we carried on the business. Bodco Plastics, which was a plastics manufacturing company, where we brought in brand new machinery to Seychelles to extrude pipes, ducting, conduit, etc. And again, a very large investment, Bodco Plastics. We've been in the business all those businesses over the years since 1966. So that is a little aside which shows that not only the North Home, but we were investing in various other businesses. I wasn't a shareholder in the North Home. I was the appointed managing director. But it was Mr. Atkinson's business, and he was very dedicated to it. I think, as the background, that is really sufficient to give you a little of the idea of what investments Mr. Atkinson and myself, and previously Mr. Hitchcock, made in the country. We made many appeals to government after the acquisition on the 31st of May, 1981.
And why was it acquired? Why did the government acquire it?
Sorry,
Yeah, I'll get in trouble. But why did the government, what was the interest in acquiring it by the government? I mean, it was 1981. So-
I'm now coming to that.
Okay, you're
and
coming to that.
I'd
Yeah,
like to go through it slowly and carefully. The North Home Hotel and Resort and land titles H202 and H344, which were owned by Mr. Atkinson and his family, was acquired by government of Seychelles on the 31st of May, 1981, without compensation and under duress. And all we're asking for actually is really natural justice, audi alterum partem, Latin. The North Home Hotel acquisition by government, chronologically, the summary is as follows. In 1970, 1970, the North Home Hotel and the parcels of land to the extent of 3.7 acres and 1.25 acres, two parcels, was purchased from the previous owner, Madame Lise Brumhead, who was a Michaud, Lise Michaud, by Mr. John Henry Atkinson, a British subject, then resident in Montreux, Switzerland. In 1974, Mr. Atkinson retained the architect, Mr. Peter Wells, to propose a chalet-style complex and development for the North Home Hotel and Resort, and to increase the accommodation from, at that time, 18 beds to 34 beds, so 9 rooms to 17 rooms, which project I was involved with at that time because we were supplying a lot of the furnishings and so on for the enlarged hotel. The kitchen was completely rebuilt, and rooms were built up on the higher level overlooking the original North Home. In 1975 and 1976, Mr. Yvon Savvy and myself were appointed directors of the company, North Home Limited, and myself as managing director. The hotel manager at that time was Mr. Les Oliver and his wife. In 1976, renovations of the kitchens, the dining room area, the bar and terrace areas were commenced, together with the buildings of 8 luxury suites. The gardens were landscaped by Mr. Chris Longhurst, who was a botanist and is very good. He really made a nice job of the gardens. Chris Longhurst, he's the late Chris Longhurst now, by introducing rare endemic plants, and he introduced various trees and bushes on the property, which were which had made it look very nice. There's actually a cannonball tree there that he introduced there. The work was being undertaken at that time in '76 by the Seychelles Construction Company, SCC, and it was completed the following year in 1977. Mr. Atkinson and his company then decided to invest in the first aquarium in Seychelles, which was completed the following year, attracting many tourists and visitors. The aquarium was put up by a foreign investor who ran the business there, and the aquarium at the hotel. The hotel manager at that time was Mr. Ray Voisey and his wife. In 1979, the directors and the owner, Mr. Atkinson, then agreed to propose the expansion of the North Home Hotel and Resort to 124 beds from the existing 34 beds, and plans were proposed for the chalet-style project, which in fact the recent development has more or less followed the project design that we had at that time. The architect for that project was Mr. Jacques Moulinier of Hughes and Polkinghorne. They were engaged to prepare the plans, etc., and put the application to government for planning approval. The application number DC 43/80 was approved by the Council of Ministers at State House on the 13th of March 1980 per Building License 43/80. License was issued
Mr. Sandy,
to us.
could you give me the name of the person who put up the aquarium?
Sorry,
The person who put up the aquarium.
the aquarium, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but there was an aquarium behind the reception area, or to the one side of the reception area, and that aquarium had tropical fish and so on. It was a very, very nice aquarium. I don't know, were you here at the time? Did you ever see it?
No, I hardly ever
It was
went
actually the first aquarium, although there's another one here who developed an aquarium recently and said this is the first aquarium, but the North Home had the first aquarium back then. So we had an approval for the hotel to increase its capacity from 34 beds to 124 beds. The approval was granted on the 13th of March 1980, and a building license was given to us. Also that year, the chartered surveyors who were assisting with the survey and topographical survey of the whole area, we engaged Barker and Barton Seychelles Limited to undertake that survey work of the existing North Home complex. And in their opinion, the current, they also gave us a valuation of the property. And in their opinion, the value of the entire building complex as at the 31st of December 1979 amounted to 6,200,000 rupees, and the total acreage of 5 acres, or just under 5 acres, was valued at 7,200,000 rupees. The total of 13,400,000 rupees. These figures did not include the freestanding furniture or equipment, fabrics and furnishings, nor any plant and equipment, kitchen equipment, air conditioning, etc., etc. And a value was estimated for that other equipment and movables at 2.8 million rupees. The value, therefore, was put at 16.2 million rupees, and in our audited accounts, a total of 21,200,000 rupees was the revalued estimate, including profits carried forward, etc., etc. In 1980, Mr. Atkinson and his company Apidex were in close negotiation with some Italian investors from Rome who were prepared to invest in the project with funds up to 75% of the required amount, provided that their company was given a management contract of the North Home Hotel and Resort for 10 years, which was agreed to by Mr. Atkinson. The Italian investors, all of them, visited the Seychelles from time to time, and some came in groups and so on. The Italian investors were namely, and I've got their names down, there's 7 Italian investors, and the percentages that they were going to share amongst themselves for the equity of their consortium to put forward 75% of the renovation and expansion of the project to put up the chalets and so on. The planning application was submitted to the Ministry of Planning and Development, Physical Planning Lands Division, by Mr. Jacques Molinier. The minister fully supported the application. The minister at that time was Dr. Maxime Ferrari. And he presented it to the Council of Ministers at State House and who approved the project for a maximum of 90 extra beds, which would have brought us up to that total that I previously mentioned. The approval, as previously mentioned, was dated the 13th of March, 1980. Of course, the Italian investors needed to have the approval and everything ready, and the design and so on by the architects and engineers. Mr. Atkinson and the Italian investors were delighted, and finance partially mobilized. As you know, people who have to put in considerable amounts of money, they don't have it readily available. They actually have to mobilize finance. And the Roman consortium, as I called them, mobilized their funds. And also at the same time, Mr. Atkinson mobilized his funds and also got the support of Barclays Bank in Victoria to put an additional 2 million rupees in the kitty for the project. Barclays Bank also agreed to a facility for the ongoing project, whilst the project was going on, of an overdraft should we require an overdraft at any time, of 5 million rupees, but the actual advance was 2 million. In April 1981, on the 24th of April 1981, the managing director of North Home Hotel, which is myself, received a letter from Mr. Derek Hall, the acting secretary of the Planning Authority, under reference DC 35/81, copied to Mr. Jacques Molinier, and I have it in the appendix here, stating that the previous decision of the Planning Authority to allow 90 extra beds of accommodation at the North Home was ill-advised, and that the Minister has therefore requested the Planning Authority to amend the approval to only 12 additional beds. That was 6 bungalows, 6 chalets. But of course, this came as an enormous shock, not only to Mr. Atkinson, but when he had to advise the Italian investors who had already mobilized funds, who had already signed a lease agreement with Mr. Atkinson, the owner of the hotel, to take on the hotel for 10 years after the chalets had been built. So Mr. Atkinson was completely shocked, and at the time he was staying at his house in Nyali Beach in Mombasa, and after I called him on the telephone, once I'd received this very strange letter, Mr. Atkinson immediately came to Seychelles to discuss this extraordinary reversal of the Council of Ministers' decision with Mr. Maxim Ferrari. He wanted to discuss it with the minister who was planning and development at that time, especially as the Italian investors and himself had already mobilized the finance and the logistics for the project. Mr. Ferrari, Minister Ferrari, was adamant that he would definitely not be prepared to see the president on the matter, and was angry that Mr. Atkinson suggested that he should. And I was present at the meeting in Dr. Ferrari's office, together with Mr. Atkinson, and I think Minister Ferrari at that time was maybe not having good relationship with the president and the SBUP and so on, but he went red in the face. He said, "No way I'm going to go to State House and argue for this." And he was the big supporter of the project initially. So Mr. Atkinson was extremely upset and verbally accused the government in front of Minister Ferrari of chicanery and reneging on their previous approval, stating that the Italian investors were claiming compensation from Mr. Atkinson and his company, and they suggested that the revocation of the planning approval was duplicity and politically motivated. These are not my words. This is what actually happened. In May 1981, on the 31st of May 1981, the government of Seychelles put Mr. Atkinson under a lot of stress and duress, and he was actually not well from all this this problem, especially as the Italian investors had already communicated to their fiduciaries, and letters had been written to Mr. Atkinson and the company that they would sue Mr. Atkinson. So on the 31st of May 1981, the government of Seychelles forced, I'm using the word forced, the sale, in inverted commas, of all the assets of the North Home Hotel and Resort for the consideration of Seychelles 1 rupee, which was completely under duress. Mr. Atkinson was stressed and he didn't know what to do. Basically, he had this this problem of the Italian consortium wanting to sue him and his company in Switzerland, and they'd already processed documentation to that effect. So, actually, the whole situation was completely under duress and veiled threats. Veiled threats, term I put in this document, were veiled threats to the other assets of Mr. Atkinson, and of course some of which I was involved in myself as a shareholder. And these veiled threats were quite substantial, and it put Mr. Atkinson into an even more difficult position, since he was the shareholder of 60% of the Botco Limited Group, and he didn't want to see that disappear as well. This is part of the veiled threats that we're talking about. Verbal, not written, but veiled threats. The 1 rupee was an insult to Mr. Atkinson, in my opinion, and was never actually paid. The 1 rupee was never actually paid. Mr. Atkinson agreed to sign the sale transfer under strong protest. He was protesting all the time, but he had to go along with it, and under strong protest, he signed the sale transfer, which was also signed by Minister Maxime Ferrari and Maître Rasoul, who was the Attorney General at that time.
So, since you did not collect the 1 rupee, you did not receive any consideration.
In the office of Maxime Ferrari, this was all signed. And,
yeah, but
so, no rupee was passed across her.
But you did not receive any other consideration for that property.
Yeah, but I have the document here.
It's not a sale.
In fact, you did not receive any consideration whatsoever.
I mean, it's it's shocking. Can you move away from the microphone, because I can't quite hear the words clearly.
I said, so you did not receive any consideration.
But they called it a
No
sale?
consideration was paid to Mr. Atkinson upon the sale agreement of 1 rupee, which was never paid. Mr. Atkinson advised Barclays Bank, who had an outstanding 2 million rupee advance on the project, and that 2 million rupee advance was on the company, North Home Limited, not on Mr. Atkinson himself. But the 2 million rupees, I was with Mr. Atkinson because he was here during all this hullabaloo. Went to see the manager of Barclays, and he sympathized with us, and he said, well, you're responsible for the 2 million rupees. And Mr. Atkinson said, no, I'm not responsible because I sold the company for 1 rupee, which I've never been paid, which includes all assets and liabilities of the company as a going concern. The liabilities and assets of the company as a going concern. So whoever takes over the going concern is responsible for the bank loan. Now here I have this document, which is the interim report of the Commission of Inquiry into the disposal of assets of the former Compagnie Sécheroise de Promotion Hôtelière, COSPRO, during the privatization of the company. And on page 45 to 47, they report on the North Home Hotel Limited. And this inquiry was done with the cooperation of the managing director and chairman of COSPRO, who at that time, who is Mr. Mukesh Vallabhji. Naturally, Mr. Mukesh Vallabhji didn't get on very well with me and a previous employee of Botco. I think he had something against Botco because of Mr. Raymond Despiville, but that's another matter. But as per the agreement dated the 29th of May 1981, Mr. John Henry Atkinson, owner of the North Home Hotel and owner of parcels H202 and H344 Glassy Mahe, with an area of 15,042 square meters and 5,003 square meters, transferred to the government of Seychelles, stamp duty free, the said parcels of land and buildings, together with all movable and immovable assets therein, subject, they're putting in here, I can see why they're doing that, subject to discharging the charge of 2 million rupees. But there was nothing in the agreement, the sale agreement, about the 2 million rupees. They took on assets and liabilities of the hotel. But he's putting here, I mean, this is Vallabhji when they were doing this report, obviously the investigating team, said subject to 2 million rupees against parcel H202. The consideration for the transfer of the government's acceptance of the liability of parcel 202, Barclays Bank International. That consideration is not in the document of sale which Mr. Atkinson signed under duress, and which was also signed by the Attorney General and Minister Ferrari. So that's a complete lie. You know, when you buy a business, you're buying its liabilities and it's that. So, you know, they put it around the wrong way. Yes, of course, after this went through, by the end of June, I think it, or early July, the government cleared the Barclays Bank loan of 2 million rupees, but that was not paid to us. they were paying on behalf of North Home Limited. And they've never paid Mr. Atkinson for the hotel. If, in my opinion, they wanted the discharge of that amount, they should have paid Mr. Atkinson 2,000,001 rupee. That's what the sale agreement should have shown. But it's not in the sale agreement at all. So the report is there in black and white. According to Mr. Velabji, the hotel was leased to Ms. Maurice Eichler for a few years, and she had issues with payment of lease rental. He was also of the view that practically Miss Maurice Eichler was leasing the hotel for nothing. I mean, this is typical Velabji talk. She made an offer of less than $2 million for the purchase of the property. She even said to Mr. Velabji, I'll buy the property from Cospro for around $2 million. It was then, according to Mr. Velabji, that Cospro decided to first lease and subsequently sell the hotel. It's all in the report. I mean, basically they're admitting to what I'm saying here, that it was completely a farce under duress. But anyway, there we are. Let me continue. If you please stop me if you need any clarification as we go along. In June 1981, the Nation newspaper, on the 12th of June 1981, published a full front-page article stating that the North Home Hotel had been acquired by government and that a new parastatal had been formed to work in the hotel sector. The new parastatal, Compagnie Séchelloise de Promotion Hôtelière, known as Cospro, then took over the hotel and property. That only happened 2 months later. The first chairman of Cospro was Mr. Robert Grandcourt, who at that time was the principal secretary to Minister Ferrari. Later, Mr. Mukesh Velabji became the chairman of Cospro. As an overview of what I've just been saying, Mr. Atkinson has made many representations over the years, not only to Cospro, making an offer to Cospro to purchase what they took from him for $3.5 million. It had been stolen from him, and he was offering the thief $3.5 million to buy it back. The chairman of Cospro at that time was Mr. Mukesh Velabji, who said to Mr. Atkinson he was not in favor of selling the North Home Hotel, and that $3.5 million was far too little. And this is before any development or anything, as the hotel was when they took it for 1 rupee. So, I'm sorry, but this is injustice, it's persecution, and the whole thing is a very distasteful matter. And the North Home events of 1981, in our opinion, and in the opinion of our lawyers, are considered to be illegal and made under extreme duress and threats, which, in the opinion of Mr. Atkinson, was rigged to take over his property by the state. Mr. Basil Soundy, as the legal representative of Mr. Atkinson, has been in and out of court many times over the past 30 to 40 years, seeking compensation for the property and closure to this whole distasteful matter, and represented in Seychelles by Maître Philippe Boulet. The representations and court hearings were without success.
But why were they without success? What did the court find? This was like a
Well, they
fair,
said, look,
reasonable sale?
they said, look, Mr. Atkinson is not a Seychellois. The first thing they said, he is not a Seychellois. He is not resident in Seychelles. He doesn't have a work permit, etc., etc., etc. But Mr. Atkinson purchased all his properties and made all these investments in Seychelles, not only Northam, Botco, and all these other companies I mentioned. He made all these investments with good intention to help the country. He loved the country, and that was done during the period prior to independence.
But why? Because
Prior to independence. When I arrived, sorry to digress, but when I arrived in Seychelles, there were only 4 hotels. You know, and I arrived on there was the Sunset Beach Hotel, the Northam Hotel, the Hotel de Seychelles, and the Fisherman's Cove. They were the only 4 at that time, back in 65, 66.
why does he have no rights? Because he's not resident in Seychelles before a court here. I don't
Well,
understand.
they were saying, you know, these were all kind of arguments that the Attorney General's office was using, and you know, saying, well, you know, he comes and stays here, and he's earning money out of the businesses he has. He doesn't have a GOP, etc. But he was never paid a salary. He didn't even get a director's fee. So,
Still,
you know,
I mean, it's his property.
and they actually...
He must have had sanction to be able to buy property. Did you need sanction then or not?
Not in those days.
Not in
no,
those days.
because
But
it
it's
was in
his
colonial
property.
times.
So why does he have
Well,
no
actu-
rights? Why are his property rights not respected?
Actually, one of the managers that Cospro put in charge there, I can't remember his name, his Italian name, I'll come across it in a minute. Mr. Atkinson had a private apartment attached to the luxury suites of the Northam Hotel, which the government, at the time they acquired it, said he could continue to use at his leisure, provided a room was available in the Northam Hotel. He could, for the duration of his life and his wife's life, to stay at the hotel at no charge, but he would have to pay for his food and beverage. There is another agreement here that which the Cospro offered, but that private section was attached to a suite called Curios, the Curios suite, and he had a private room attached to the Curios suite where he kept his clothes, his laptop, and various things here that belonged to him. And Mr. Arturo, I think his name was, the Italian manager, broke into that area and took everything out and it disappeared. So there's another case in here somewhere where Mr. Atkinson sued Cospro in court for his own property that had been taken out and taken away. So that is also in part and parcel, but it's really not the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is they took the North Home under duress, and we've been seeking natural justice. Obviously, there's a bill of sale which is signed for 1 rupee. 1 rupee has never been paid, so it's null and void, that sales, in my opinion, because it was never paid for. But it's all we're asking for is natural justice. It should be noted that the parastatal Cospro sold the North Home property for a large sum of money to a Swedish Maldivian investment company named Universal Group, represented by Hussein Afif, Lars Petra, and Amit Mahi Didi, who resides in Seychelles and is the current owner of these properties. The North Home Hotel and Resort has subsequently been leased to Hilton Hotels Group, and I believe the other properties owned by the Universal Group have also been leased to the Hilton Hotels. The amount of money that the investment company invested to pay Cospro for the hotel, I don't have the exact figure, but it was a lot more than $3.5 million. It was something like $10 to $15 million. I don't have the actual fact because if there are any records, which there must be, they probably don't show the correct figure.
There's nothing in that interim report.
So much in view and so much under the table. This is
What was the name?
surmising.
What was the name of that Maldivian, of that Norwegian Maldives company?
Swedish.
The investment company. What was their name?
Sorry?
The company that bought North Home. What's the name of the company?
It was a foreign company.
Yeah, what is it called?
Well, at that time, it was the company's name was Universal Group. In fact, I think I've got the documents here, Appendix 18B.
And which year was that?
I will tell you. I will tell you. This was the actual transfer took place in 2005. 2005.
And you have the names of the shareholders?
And the North Home, the Nation newspaper, also at that time, front page and second page. North Home Hotel gets new owners. They don't mention the price or anything like that in there, of course. North Home Hotel Limited yesterday announced that it had signed an agreement with Whole Île Company Limited. I think this is the registered company they registered afterwards, the group to operate in Seychelles.
What is it called?
I'm trying to read something which is a little bit faint, but maybe I have it here. The grand opening was on Saturday, December the 10th, 2005. That was after the development had taken place. HUIT ILLES Company Limited. HUIT, one word, and ILLES, second word, Company Limited.
It means 8 islands.
The Seychelles
Yes.
they say here the company is a Seychelles registered company,
That's the
which its shareholders include prominent hoteliers from the Maldive Islands, namely Mr. Hamid Mahir Didi and Mr. Hussein Afif, whose hotel groups in the Maldives control over 2,500 beds, according to the press release. So, I mean, we're digressing a little bit, but if I go back to this.
Gives us an idea.
All this time, when you've been trying to get compensation, has anyone recognized, any government authority, court authority recognized that
Well,
there should be compensation?
I can pass you papers and so on. Mr. Rennie, Mr. Michel, Mr. Danny Ford, I went to see them all. Lady Baroness Chalker, who's no longer, in England, took up the matter with the Foreign Office on behalf of Mr. Atkinson, who has British nationality. The British High Commissioner in Seychelles took up the matter. They said this is totally unfair to a British citizen who has invested in the country. Took up the matter. And it was the High Commissioner that suggested that to Mr. Atkinson to write a personal letter to Baroness Linda Chalker, and which he did do, and I've got a copy of his letter in this document. And they were sympathetic, but of course the British government can't put any pressure on a foreign entity, a foreign government. But they took it up, and we took it up with the various ministers, with Jacques Odoul at that time as well, with a more recent minister, I can't remember his name at the moment, but let me go through this and stop me at any time. It's understood that Cospro was offered 3.5 million for the North Home some years ago prior to the sale to Universal Group by another investor in Mauritius, but the offer was turned down as being too little and said that it was worth at least Mr. Valabji's words, it was worth at least 3 times that offer, as quoted by Mr. Anil Bible. Mr. Anil Bible quoted that to me and to Mr. Atkinson, who was the general manager of COSPRO with his office at Maison du Pape. The chairman of COSPRO at that time was, of course, Mr. Valabji. Mr. Valabji was not in favor of selling the North Home to a Mauritian investor. For what reason, I don't know. Generally, it'll be recalled that President René's statement in early 1993, he said that there are cases where properties were compulsorily acquired through improper motives, and that government was reviewing these acquisitions. These are the words spoken by President René. There are cases where properties were compulsorily acquired through improper motives, and that government was reviewing these acquisitions. That was in early 1993. This statement was well received by investors and by the public. It was suggested that the review should be carried out by a specially constituted independent body or tribunal, which could receive requests for review by any property owner whose property was compulsorily acquired. Such a tribunal could make the following recommendations. 1, to return the property. 2, review the amount of compensation payable. And 3, restore the title of ownership to the former owner, but allowing possession of the property to the current owners for a period of time or years, after which the possession would revert to the former rightful owner. This method may be an acceptable way of dealing with land and property on which buildings and new buildings had been erected.
Mr. Sandhi,
These are not my words.
Sorry, you're quoting this from which document?
This was a statement made by State
René.
House
Okay.
in 1993.
Here I have a file, 26th of February 1993.
There you go. Yes. Yeah.
Which date?
Yeah.
The file.
Yeah. But those are not my
26th of
words.
February 1993.
Okay.
Folio 14.
In sometime back in I don't know when I put this together, but it was
Yeah, do you know what was the occasion?
I think it was in 2018, 2017, 2018. The government actually set up a land compensation tribunal
Yes. Yeah.
and a Truth, Reconciliation, and National Unity Commission, right?
Committee.
And also a commission of inquiry to commence work in the COSPRO cases. This was all done in 2018. The commission was set up by President Faure in July 2018. All this only now, despite Article 26, 1 to 5 of the Constitution of the Republic of Seychelles, which became law on the 21st of June 1993. Conclusion: all efforts to settle the North Home Hotel and Resort acquisition by the government of Seychelles in May 1981 have been unsuccessful. We have made numerous representations to the authorities, to the Ombudsman, to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Land Compensation Tribunal, to President Faure, to the Attorney General, to the Ombudsman, to the Minister of Tourism, to the Minister of Finance. This has been circulated to many people. We also sent our appeal to the Ombudsman for review, and she fully agreed that there should be natural justice. It's totally unfair. In fact, I also received a letter, I don't know, a letter or whether it's an email, from at that time the Minister of Finance saying, yes, this is terrible. I didn't know about it. You know, something should be done.
What did they do then? And they did nothing?
Nothing, no.
And how long
This
ago
was
was
a
that?
recent Minister of Finance.
Right.
Who is
But
now...
the Ombudsman, did she make a recommendation that was then made to government? You don't know. The Ombudsman? No.
To Mrs. Tiron?
Yeah, did she make a recommendation to government?
She, I don't know whether she's put it in any of her annual reports. Perhaps you can inquire about that.
We can look.
But she was very sympathetic about it, and she has this document as well. So,
Yeah, it would be good if we could get from the Ombudsman her inquiry into it. Thanks.
I've got copies of the various documentation here from the Companies and the Lands Acquisition Act. It wasn't acquired by under the Lands Acquisition Act. It was under duress, and they forced Mr. Atkinson to sell it. We even made representations to the Seychelles Tourism Board and various other private sector organizations and so on, which didn't get us very far. And of course, Mr. Boulet was supporting this, and I'd like to actually read something to you from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution of Massachusetts. And it was a letter I received by airmail, copied to me, but it was actually addressed to the Seychelles Tourism Board in Victoria, and is dated the 14th of May, 1979. And I read, I think that it was in 1963 that ships from our laboratory first began to call at the Seychelles. Scientists and sailors alike were quick to discover and fall in love with the North Home Hotel. For all of us who have ever stayed there, the beautiful setting, the simple charm, the historical interest of the old building, and the hospitality of the management have made it our favorite of all places we have visited in the course of our work around the world. We all get a bit dreamy-eyed when we start to talk of the North Home. This past March, a group of us from WHOI were at the North Home again, awaiting the arrival of a research vessel on which we were to work. As usual, we took rooms at the old building and were as pleased as ever by it. We were all of us dismayed, therefore, to learn that the tourist board is requiring the management to remodel the old building drastically, perhaps even to replace it with new buildings in order to bring it into line with modern style and convenience of the new hotels that have sprung up around the world and around Mahe since the completion of the airport in Mahe. Places like this, places like the Coral Strand, the Fisherman's Cove, are all very nice, but one can stay in hotels of that tropical international modern style anywhere in the tropics, anywhere in the world. Fiji, Samoa, Tahiti, New Caledonia, Puerto Rico, Trinidad, Hawaii, Kenya, wherever. I won't read the whole thing, but finally they say, I hope that you will consider these remarks as coming from one who has greatly enjoyed his visits to the Seychelles and is concerned to find again our future visits that the same qualities we have treasured in the past may have gone. So, you know, there were a lot of things like that written about the North Home. But this document I can give to the Commission. I have 2 copies. I have a recent list, this list, which probably the Commission has as well, of all the properties.
No, we
of
don't
all the
have it.
properties
Yeah, that would be
that have
great.
been taken. It's called List of Dispossessed Properties in the Seychelles.
Compiled
It doesn't give you the name of the owners. It gives you the year the properties were acquired, the Gazette notice number, the land title number, the area in square meters, the area in acres, and the district or islands where they are. And it's a long, long list, I can assure you. And
Who's compiled this?
I
Compiled
got
by
it from a friend in government. It's a government list.
Right,
I
okay.
don't think it's a document they would publish, but it came from there. I can give you that.
Government
It's,
sources, yes, please.
I don't need it, but you can see how thick it is. There's a lot of
Yes.
pages. I'd like to ask the Commission if there's anything in their opinion that I should do on behalf of the heirs and successors to Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson. I feel obliged. I've been working on this for the family and for the late Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson over the years, and it's almost 40. Well, it's 41 years now since then since it was taken over.
I suppose one thing is what outcome would you, what sort of recommendation would you like to see made in relation to this issue.
Well, the heirs and successors they're obviously not interested in getting the property back or anything like that. What they're looking for is natural justice, a fair adjudication of the whole problem with some compensation. And they've said to me, we will accept what the value of the property was at the end of 1979, which is a long time ago. And it's in, I do actually have the accounts for that year here somewhere. It's not in that document. But at that time, without any goodwill, it was about 16 million rupees. If you add goodwill to it, they added, I think, about 5 million rupees to the 16. It was 21 million rupees, which was a lot less than the government received for the property before it was redeveloped. Yeah.
So they're not looking for market value like they do now in the courts, no.
Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson, God rest their souls, I'm sure are there looking down today, and it's in his will, or in their will, they asked their heirs and successors to stay in touch with me, and on your advice, I got because the power of attorney that I had for Mr. Atkinson was no longer valid. I said, please supply a power of attorney for me to act on your behalf, and I'd be willing then to put it forward to the TRNUC as case number 66. As soon as I received their power of attorney, which they arranged in December. I only got it in January. So that's when I said I'm prepared to come and sit before you and explain the situation. But it is very sad. I have no personal interest whatsoever. I have no investment in the Northam Hotel. I have 40 years of time invested, but I haven't any investment myself. So I wouldn't gain in any way from any compensation that perhaps may be given. So I'm doing this on behalf of the family, and I think it's only fair to the late Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson.
You've prepared everything so well. We have to be extremely grateful to you for that, because it saves us so much time when someone brings us everything we need to look at.
Yes, yes.
We're very grateful for that.
And it's very unfair of the COSPRO report, which was done with the assistance of Mr. Vilabji, for them to put the 2 million rupees as a payment. It wasn't that way at all. It wasn't in the deed of sale. The deed of sale, you'll see the deed of sale in that document there. And it's not even mentioned in that. The deed of sale was for 1 rupee, and the 1 rupee was never paid. Never paid.
The 2 million cannot be taken as compensation to Mr. Atkinson. It was just clearing the debt of Northam.
Sorry?
I said the 2 million cannot be taken as payment.
No, it can't be taken as payment.
No.
I mean, when you, this is a deed of sale that they drew up with Maxime Ferrari's name on it, with Robert Goncourt's name on it, with Rasoul's name of it, who was the Attorney General at that time. And it was for 1 rupee. No mention of 2 million rupees. Now, when you buy a business or an asset as a going concern and taking it over as a going concern and putting your own management in and so on, you're buying the assets and the liabilities. And that was a bank liability to North Home Limited, which was taken by government. And they continued as North Home Limited. You see? I found a piece of paper here which was actually minutes of what used to be predecessor of the Seychelles Hoteliers and Tourism Association, SHTA. This is the Seychelles Hoteliers and Restaurateurs Association. And I was on one of the members as representing North Home Hotel. And in the minutes you can see there, and this was minutes in a meeting in August 1979. Our chairman at that time of the committee was Joe Monchugi. Vice chairman was Mr. Frischo, Bougainville Hotel, was Frischo. The secretary was Mr. Gould, who used to run the Fisherman's Cove. The treasurer was Mr. Fisher, who was the manager of or general manager of the Coral Strand. Other committee members was Madame Georges of Auberge Louis XVII, Alain Saint-Ange of Cabin des Anges on La Digue, Mr. George Black of Wind's Wagon Wheel, the chief tourism officer at that time was Mr. Thomas, and the hotel school was represented as well by Mrs. Eichler. And we had a lot of members. We had nearly all the tourism and restaurateurs in the association. And I say, reading it back in minutes like that, very similar problems then in 1979 as we have now.
What was it called again? The Hotel and Restaurateurs Association?
It was called then the Seychelles Hoteliers and Restaurateurs Association. Yeah. Yeah. I am a member of this HTA because my wife and I have Villa Caballero in Ocap, which are luxury chalets. I do have the audited accounts for ending 31st of December 1980. So the figures that I've been quoting are actually from actual audited accounts.
And do we have a copy of them in these documents?
I don't have a copy, but
Yeah,
if you
we
want
could
to
take a
make
copy. Yeah, we'll take a copy. Yeah, we'd like to.
I will
Yeah,
need this back for my
Yeah.
file.
yeah. We just copy it and give it back
It's
immediately. You can just give it to
Yeah.
someone else to copy. Yeah, they can bring it back. Thanks.
Can I just read this letter that I hope I'm not overstaying my time. Can I just read this letter that Mr. Atkinson On Wednesday, the 14th of October, 1992, because he wasn't getting anywhere with representations with Mr. Boulay and so on and so forth, and the government here, he addressed this to the Honourable Mrs. Linda Chalker, Minister for Overseas Development, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Downing Street, London. And he said, "Dear Minister, request for assistance in recovering immovable properties which were confiscated by the government of Seychelles. I am John Henry Atkinson, born in April 1931 at Birmingham, England, and therefore British by birth. I neither have nor have I ever held any other citizenship. At the time of the revolution which brought the current regime to power, I was and had for some years been resident in Seychelles. I respectfully request your kind intervention, perhaps through the British High Commission in Seychelles, to whom my Seychelles resident representative, Mr. Basil Soundy, is known and available to liaise with your Mr. Sharland. Mr. Sharland was the High Commissioner at that time. There were two claims. Claim number one was concerning the property at Beauvalon, which eventually was returned. Claim number two, it says here, in late 1970 in Seychelles, I founded North Home Limited, which company purchased from the Michaud family with effect from January 1971 the freehold beachfront land surveyed as plot H202, and then a small but beautifully rustic North Home Hotel as a going concern which stood upon the land. Then in 1973, we purchased, to enable development of the hotel and business, the immediately adjacent plot, H344, from the Michaud family. Subsequently, we engaged British architects and embarked upon extensive improvements, including much rustic extension of the buildings, modern catering facilities, and 7 extremely luxurious and spacious split-level suites, all of which the improvements the Tourism Authority particularly welcomed, acclaiming the development to be tasteful and the suites to be the best available in the Seychelles. That was at that time.
Maybe you could give us a copy.
All of the capital had originated from me until seeing our good progress. Barclays Bank advanced North Home Limited partial loans, eventually being a total of rupees 2 million. This is where the 2 million comes from. At the time of the revolution, we had further development plans which were to be partly financed by an increase in loans by Barclays. However, the revolution left the company with an uncertain future, and so we completed all the work already in hand, but refrained from further development pending the resumption of good business from our main sources, which were Thomas Cook and Hayes and Jarvis in UK, and our reputation and willingness by Barclays to increase their partial loan. By 1980, I was being subjected to tremendous contradictory pressures. In one direction, I was being pressed to, as a tourism authority put it at the time, to modernize the image, meaning do away with all the rustic charm, which the guests always admired, but some people in authority felt were old-fashioned and therefore shameful, and substitute concrete and chrome and in another direction, I was being pressed to demonstrate my confidence and support of the regime by resuming development. But here again, the pressure was to redraw and redesign the style, not in our guests' tastes. The hotel certainly needed a further rooms to make it economically more viable. But where were the extra guests to come from at that time? Which question caused the only pressure with which we agreed, being pressure not to increase the availability of additional empty hotel space in the Seychelles, because at that time, after the revolution and so on, all these things were problems. And so on and so forth. There's a long letter to Baroness Chalker, to which she replied and sent the reply through High Commissioner Sharland. But again, I think some representations were made to Dr. Maxime Farai, who was the Minister of Development at that time. A copy went to him, but he, possibly being out of favor, I don't know, but possibly being out of favor at that time with President Rennie, I don't know, was reluctant to take this matter forward to State House to argue a case on behalf of the Atkinson family.
So we'll try and find out from Mr. Grancu why he was reluctant. Right. We will ask him. Yeah, we'll ask him. But
I mean, I could have easily said to the to the heirs of Mr. Atkinson, you know, I mean, this has got nothing to do with me. Sort it out yourself. But I feel obliged because Mr. Atkinson was a very good friend, and his wife a good friend of my wife, and you know, I mean, we were in business together in other areas, and I feel obliged to follow it through. And the family, theirs and successors, are very happy that I'm doing so.
you're doing a very good job for them. Very well prepared, very good job. So thank you very much. And it would be nice if it could be resolved after all of this time in a fair manner. I don't know how you've managed to keep it going all this time, actually. But like a lot of people in Seychelles, it's like the land of being patient, right? Seems to be.
Madam Chair, I'd like to thank you for listening to the saga of the North Home. And all I can do is hope and pray that maybe something will come from it, and maybe the heirs of Mr. Atkinson will have at least some natural justice out of the whole matter. The North Home was the very first hotel that became a hotel owned and managed by the COSPRO group. Mm-hmm. And then after that, many other hotels and properties were taken over by government and came under the umbrella of COSPRO. hence that long COSPRO report.
We'll do our best. We'll do our best.
Thank you.
And we will follow up with Mr. Grancu in particular, I think, and we will ask him. And it would be good if we could get the Ombudsman's report, and any of the court proceedings would also be useful. But thank you very much, Mr. Soundry, for coming today. We have no further questions, I believe. Yeah. So thank you very much. You will be hearing from us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank
thank you. So we'll adjourn now. We'll be back at 3. Thanks.
All rise.